I've said this before. I don't know what it is. I don't know whether it's the gods of hot beverages are shining down on kitchens around the world. I don't know whether there is some chemical variability, but sometimes you just nail a cup of tea and it's like the single best thing in the universe. It's brilliant. Love it. Right, hello team, and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pierce. Ukraine War news update, first part thereof for the 9th of November 2023. Let's go to the Ukrainian general staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before, all the usual caveats apply, and some very interesting figures to look at today. Wowzers. Right, we're up to over 1,000 in personnel losses again. This must indicate some heavy activity along the front lines in certain places. It might also indicate Ukrainians starting to hit troop accumulations again with things like HIMARS. I'm not sure. I'm speculating. No idea. But those high numbers must be as a result of something, or at least the change in the trend line. I mean, it's been high now for a week, but ticking back upwards to over 1,000, I think is worth noting. Also, 15 tanks is up. 18 armored personnel vehicles is pretty high, and 36 artillery systems is another huge number posted there. Not only that, but 3 multiple launch rocket systems and 5 anti-aircraft warfare systems. This is a really bad set of figures for the Russians, and again signifies those things I've already mentioned. I think there is a concerted effort to continue degrading the Russian capabilities behind the lines. We're seeing quite a lot of drone and artillery and HIMARS hits on equipment, as well as what we've been seeing previously. But just, 36 artillery systems and 5 anti-aircraft warfare systems is going to hurt the Russians, that is for sure. 26 drones and 1 cruise missile, not from last night. I can't recall any drones or cruise missiles being used last night. 39 vehicles and fuel tanks is another hefty number in that category. Logistics is going to hurt for the Russians, and 5 pieces of special equipment. So I think that is a really significant day of losses for the Russians there for the last 24 hours. But then, take it with a pinch of salt, it is coming from the Ukrainian general staff. Again, it's not so much the exact numbers, but the general trends, and understanding that this is representing something. But even when you do look at the numbers, I've seen footage of a number of bits of kit that would support at least these trends. Andrew Perpetua, with his losses as a mapper that looks over all the socials, tries really hard to look at a lot of Russian sources to get a picture of what's going on. It looks like there is a ratio of about 3 to 1 Russian to Ukrainian losses. Let's quickly look at what he has for Ukrainian losses first. So we do have a Bradley in there, taken out by Lancet, and a multiple launch rocket system, again, Lancet. Indeed, all of these are drones, apart from the unknown causes, but then they could well be drones as well. You've got basic APCs and IFVs thrown in there as your main source of losses there. Nothing of crazy high value. Obviously, they're not going to want to lose their multiple launch rocket systems. We go to look at the Russian losses. There's another Tor air defense system that has been lost. In fact, I think I have footage of that. No, I've got a footage of a thermobaric munition going up in style there. A really massive explosion. So you could throw that into probably the artillery there. It's not on this list, but it could have only just come out after Andrew did this list. But yeah, 1 air defense system, a Lear 2, that is an electronic warfare piece that I've got footage of as well. Talk about that in a second. A couple of surveillance and comms. A Zala launch van, that's added because actually, the claim was it's a HIMARS strike. I'm not sure it was a HIMARS strike. I don't think it's big enough to be a HIMARS munition, but they are. I've seen a number of times where the Ukrainians have been striking at launch vehicles with the launch team, and there was someone dragging out a Zala Lancet, and then it hit the ground near both, and I think both were taken out. So that is not just taking a drone out in the air, but that's taking out the drone capabilities, like the people who are trained to use them and the launch van, so on and so forth. A number of tanks lost there. That's quite a large number of tanks, including a T-90A. It's not T-90M, but it is still a T-90. And then a bunch of logistics vehicles, quite a large amount, a few APCs and IFVs. So that is, again, a representation of heavy Russian losses, if not evidence for all of them. We can see the picture being painted there. Now, Zelensky last night was very explicit in saying Ukraine had lost in the war fewer than 20% of what Russia had lost in terms of personnel. So speaking remotely at a conference, he said, I cannot share with you our victims, our losses, but I can say that they are today at least 5 times less. Now, this is the president of Ukraine. This is going to surely have an element of propaganda attached to it. Either he's absolutely on the money and correct, or he's incorrect but thinks he's correct, or he's lying. So one of those three. But the claim is that the Ukrainians are losing less than a fifth of what the Russians are losing, which is a huge claim there. Now, talking about the Lear 2, this electronic warfare system on top of a Tiger van or armored vehicle there. This is an electronic warfare system. And as far as I understand it, I don't know if this is definitely the case, but it sort of drove into the Kherson region, sort of Dnipro River region, and was blown up straight away. And this might, if that's true, then it gives you an indication of how tightly the Ukrainians are observing that area and taking out anything. We've heard that there are no tanks in certain areas up to sort of 25 kilometers from the river. There are claims that there are Russians have claimed that Ukrainian air defense systems, including some of their pretty decent ones like Iris-Ts, are just 2 to 3 kilometers behind the river on the Ukrainian side, on the right bank of the river. And they are active. We've got electronic warfare drone, sort of anti-drone boats going up and down the river. We've got a concerted effort to take out Russian electronic warfare, counter-battery fire capability, and artillery pieces. This is looking like a well-organized maneuver going on the Dnipro River. At least that's my speculation of adding the pieces of the jigsaw together. I hope I've got an accurate understanding, given that most of the claims, actually no, some of the claims are coming from Russian sources as well. So, I either way, this is another piece of electronic warfare, fairly decent bit of kit being taken out. Another TOS 1 catastrophically exploding with all its munitions on board. That will give a big old fireball of an explosion. And this has just come out now. One of Ukraine's leading commanders in the front line in the south, Alexander Ternavsky, says that they've destroyed Russia's newest anti-aircraft missile system, the S-300B4. This will be hugely significant if this is what I was talking about over the last couple of weeks, which is Ukraine have to have this single-minded approach to taking out air defense systems like this. Find the very best air defense systems around and take them out. Get all the intelligence you can and fire everything at these bad boys. The Russian air defense networks need to be degraded fundamentally, and it looks like the Ukrainians are trying very hard to do that. The Russians have lost an awful lot of high-value air defense systems recently. I don't know whether this would be included in the 5 anti-aircraft warfare systems the General Staff have claimed have been destroyed over the last 24 hours, but nonetheless, that is a significant loss for the Russians there. Now, going on to distant strikes, it's been a really relatively quiet night, but there was a missile attack on Odessa last night, and a Kh-31P anti-radiation missile hit a civilian ship flying the flag of Liberia during its port call. As a result of the attack, one person died. I think it was Filipino crew on there, 3 others injured. I wonder whether there will ever be, when something like this happens, which is a civilian, international civilian piece of infrastructure or ship here being hit by Russian missiles, and the death of international civilians just doing their job of exporting. I think this was an iron ore boat here that was due to go to China, whether China are going to get up in arms about this, whether the Filipinos are going to get whether the Philippines is going to get up in arms about this, and Liberia as well, or does everyone go, oh, that's a bit of a hornet's nest, don't want to poke that. But Russia have hit a Liberian registered vessel. Now that means very little in terms of who actually owns the ship and who really is operating it. But it just doesn't sit well with me. It's awful that they are just consistently hitting Odessa. Right. Alexei Danilov here. Ukraine is making huge gains in occupied Crimea, he says. Okay, so what does the National Security and Defense Council Secretary say? Currently, we are having great success in the Crimea direction. Earlier this month, the Ukrainian officials confirmed the destruction of a newly built Russian cruise missile vessel in Kerch. So that was the Askold warship. The damage to the ship will render it inoperable for the foreseeable future, says the ISW. Yep, almost certainly. Ukrainian forces have previously launched other successful strikes against Russian assets. We've had the destruction of, of course, Crimean Bridge much earlier, but actually more recently we've had a lot of S-300 missile systems, possibly S-400 missile systems, all sorts of targets within Crimea being hit consistently. Danilov said, we constantly pay attention to what concerns the land, but what concerns the destruction of the Russian Federation, the destruction of their assets on the territory of Crimea, and the destruction of the Black Sea Fleet. These are huge achievements of our country. And of course, getting the Black Sea Fleet to pretty much move out of Sevastopol is a massive win for the Ukrainians. Two big explosions have independently been reported in Skadovsk in occupied Kherson. Petro Andriushchenko, Ukraine's advisor to Mariupol, says the arrivals were on a military base. Now, this is causing quite a lot of conversation at the moment because, as Dmitry says, there was a shelling in a temporarily occupied port city of Skadovsk in the Zaporizhia region this morning, which resulted in the collapse of a building. Commentary from Russians hinting that some important people were in the house. Quote, not military, but others, perhaps officials, but the situation appears worse than what the authorities are trying to paint it. We will soon hear more about it. Different things about this coming out. Some saying that there is a military target that was hit, others saying important officials. Skadovsk is one to watch for today. That has pretty much only just happened. And this was out of sync. That should have been earlier. That's to say that the crew, one of whom is in hospital there, Filipino crew, a maritime pilot was killed, 3 injured. Right, moving on to other bits and pieces. As I say, not too much, quite a quiet night really overnight in Ukraine, which is good news for the Ukrainians, of course. A boy kidnapped by Russia. This piece of news was doing the rounds yesterday and the day before, I think. A boy kidnapped by Russia from Mariupol and then sent to Russian family has been given a military summons. Astonishing story about 17-year-old Bogdan Yermokhin, who turns 18 in 3 weeks. Right, his sister is in Ukraine as his legal guardian demands that he's returned. I could give you the full story here, but actually, it involves Lvova Belova, who herself is responsible for moving a bunch of children out of Ukraine. Indeed, she's adopted one herself, but she's got an arrest warrant on her head by the ICC as well as Putin. So it's those two people. But anyway, Anton Gerashchenko does a good summary here. So a teenager taken from Mariupol to Russia was given a summons to the military enlistment center. This is the first such case known. 17-year-old Ukrainian Bogdan Yermokhin, taken by the Russian military from occupied Mariupol in 2022 and placed in a foster family, was issued a summons to the army. The lawyer Katerina Bobrovska, representing the interests of Yermokhin and his sister Valeria in Ukraine, told it to the Grati publication. The young man was assigned an appointment in the Moscow region military enlistment office for December 2023. At that time, he will already be 18. The information about him became known in April from the Commissioner of Children's Rights in the Russian Federation, Maria Lvova-Belova. She reported that law enforcers detained the teenager at the border of Belarus when he was trying to return to Ukraine. Does that not tell you something? Does that not tell you you've taken a child out of Ukraine for his safety or whatever it is that your official line is, and he's tried to escape through Belarus back to Ukraine? He doesn't want to be there. You have stolen a child and now you're going to enlist him in the army to fight against his country that he's trying to get back to. Now, what kind of warped sense of morality do you have to try and justify that? Russian state media called the situation a provocation by the Ukrainian security services. How about asking him? How about wondering why he was on the border trying to get back to Ukraine? Jesus wept. Persistent railway sabotage by activists inside Russia is posing a challenge to military logistics, according to the British intelligence. So this is something that I report on not infrequently. It happens on a regular basis. I can't find the source there, but there are relay boxes that are set alight. There are occasionally bigger things that cause the derailing of trains within Russia, so on and so forth. And this does, cumulatively does have an effect on Russian logistics, as according to British intelligence. So that is their assessment there. And finally, for this first video, Zelensky says that Ukraine is still capable of battlefield achievements despite frustration. The president reassured audiences at the Reuters next conference on November the 8th that Ukraine is still on track to deliver military results by the end of the year. And I think this is true. I don't think he's just talking this up. I think just by looking at the fact that a warship's just been blown up, that an S-300's just been taken out in the last 24 hours. I think that Ukraine can do significant damage to the Russians still, particularly, as I say, if they use a lot of long-range munitions. So we have a plan. We have very concrete cities, very concrete directions where we go. I can't share all the details, but we have some slow steps forward in the south. Also, we have steps on the east. Ukraine's highly anticipated southern counteroffensive has experienced significant challenges, while Zelensky's leadership is being increasingly scrutinized. Earlier this month, Zelensky admitted that the war had reached a World War I type stalemate, but the president rebutted these remarks in a rare public dispute. Some fear political infighting could result from cracks in the president's image as calls for fresh presidential elections in 2024 emerge. Quote, everyone should be concentrating their efforts right now on defending the country, Zelensky told followers in the nightly address on the 6th. Also suggesting no elections would be held. Put themselves together and do not rest. Do not drown in infighting or other issues. The situation is now the same as it was before. There is no victory. If there is no victory, there will be no country. He said that the 8th of November was a successful day, and we'll talk about this in a little while with regard to the European Commission opening EU accession negotiations with Ukraine, and that'll feature in the next video. Anyway, that's enough from me. A relatively short one today, quite a quiet night, but enough for you to be thinking about. Anyway, thanks so much for your support. Take care, and I'll speak to you soon.